and around the world. We've got an action-packed show lined up. If it's safe to do so, make yourself a cup of coffee and tea and sit back. Or if you're already having your dinner, sit back and listen in. And get in touch on our Facebook page, the Weekly Sports Show. Get in touch with Salford Weekly Sports Show for questions, comments, otherwise. We've had some really fascinating questions and contributions over the last few weeks. Do get in touch on Twitter as well. Send us an email and put some questions to us. Tonight we've got a special guest who played as a youth player with Sheffield United. He would then go on to travel the world playing everywhere pretty much. Now he's been back in the UK, back home, playing again, and he's building his career again. He's going to give us an insight into the world of football. You know, we've had professional footballers on the show. We've had people on the show who manage at professional level. Now we're going to look at the other side of football as well. Kingsley, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, great to have you on board. So on the show, Kingsley, we've had people or footballers that play professionally. We've had managers that have been at professional level as well. We also have had people who play sport in general at amateur, semi-pro level. There's another side to football as well that people probably aren't aware about. Someone like yourself who played with a very successful youth team at Sheffield United. To me, from the outside looking in, a lot of different people in the professional side of things thought, okay, you know, tip to sort of go as far as one can go in the game professionally. Obviously, you're sort of modest and you'll have your own view on that. But the game's brought you around the world and you've played in different countries and that. So just give us an insight into yourself in your career. Where did it all begin for you, football? We'll sort of highlight some of the ups and downs and your own moments throughout the football. Yeah. I
mean, so for myself personally, my journey, obviously, like you've alluded to, has been kind of, it's taken me around the world. But obviously, starting from grassroots level was kind of playing with the local team in my area. Up until the teenage years, in which I had a small kind of stint with Oldham Athletic. After the stint with Oldham Athletic, it went again back into kind of the grassroots level and joined an academy side, which I'm sure they have lots of those out there these days. But the academy that I was at the time was called Provision. Mm-hmm. It was a kind of a second chance academy for young lads who'd been released from football clubs as a bit of a pathway to try and get themselves back into the professional game. So that was the path that I went down with the guy who ran the academy at the time, ex-Man City player Andy Hill. It kind of went from there, really. Spent a year with him, obviously working with the academy and training, to a point where we went to a football tournament in Spain. It had lots of, obviously, good professional sides in the tournament, Spanish sides such as Valencia, Villarreal, and a few UK teams are over there as well. You know, Watford, Sheffield United, just to name a couple. After a successful tournament, I was only 15 at the time. When I got back, I got the phone call to say that Sheffield United wanted to sign me on a youth scholarship deal. And I spent the best part of 3 years there between 2008 to 2011. The football, obviously, moving into a professional setup at that young age was a big kind of eye-opener for me in regards to the facilities, the kind of training pitches, and the way just basically you get looked after as a player. Not just as a first-team player, but obviously all the way through the youth system. It was a great platform for me to grow as a person and as a player and really kind of knuckle down and try and make a career out of it. After the 3 years at Sheffield United, like, as you mentioned, you know, we had a great youth team. Yeah. You know, players who've gone on to play for the country and obviously at top level in English football. Yeah. You know, in the Premier League, you've got. You guys reached
the FA Youth Cup final, I believe, if I'm sort of correct in saying. Was that the Sheffield United team that reached the FA Youth Cup final, or? Yeah,
so the FA Youth Cup final was a year where we did very well as a youth team, and like I said, as I mentioned, some of the personnel who've been involved in that setup, you know, the likes of say Harry Maguire, who's gone on to achieve excellent things, and he's somebody that a lot of kind of his ex-teammates always look up to and think he's done very well, and obviously gone and proven to everybody that is a great setup and a great academy to come from. You've got other players such as Kyle Walker, who came through that setup.
Yeah.
Matthew Loughton, again, Premier League level with Aston Villa at the time and Burnley. So there have been obviously several of other players who've also gone to play at league level of some sort, and obviously the top end of non-league football as well. My journey personally after the time at Sheffield United, I came out of football and joined a non-league side in the North West Counties in and around the area that I lived in at the time, which is Bacup Borough. And that was a great education in regards to men's football for me, after coming out of the youth setup and the reserve setup at Sheffield United, to really get a taste of what men's football was all about. At the time, I felt my technical ability was kind of ahead of that standard. However, it was a completely different game of football, and I had to learn and adjust to that side of the game.
That's a great point. That's a great point. So for sure, and I think from certainly from my experience from the outside looking in, I think sometimes players, when they do get released or things don't go to plan, I think there's sort of a consideration that they're sort of going to turn up to non-league, but it is obviously a different style of football, and whichever way you look at it, and it's very competitive and physical, one would think, and players like yourself are very technical. And by the way, I mean, you guys did do well at Bacup. You did well at Bacup. You were influential in winning a trophy and doing really well too. So that's for sure. But I think the long and short of it is, like you says, it's to adapt. And did you find it hard to adapt? I mean, 1 minute you're sort of like playing in the FA Youth Cup against teams that are in the Premier League, and you're playing and you've got your aspirations, and then on top of that, I know that you'll have seen players who you were playing with who were playing professionally, thinking, okay, what now for me? And that's not disrespecting the non-league. There's some great players there. We've seen a lot of great players, and by the way, Bacup is a great club, and it's a well-run club. In saying that, you're at Sheffield, aspirations are to play at the highest level, and from the point of view of the mental side of things, how did you find that, to think, okay, some of these lads I've played with are now in the pro game at highest level, and here's me fighting in non-league to get back again? Was that sort of...
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a difficult time for a young lad who obviously has been through the system. There's no doubt about that. There's certain lads who I played with who kind of used that as an excuse and kind of gave up on football at that point, but I've also seen lads do the opposite, where it's spurred them on and given them that extra drive and motivation to kick on and get back into the professional setup. But for me personally, I was one of the later, the latter one there, in regards to my attitude was always to try and go back to the professional game. I worked hard, and again, I think circumstance and timing is also a big one in that regard. One manager might really fancy you, whereas another one may not, in regards to the way they want to play in their setup. And obviously luck and timing can be a big part of that. But, in regards to being a young lad going through that, it's just a case of kind of keeping the belief in yourself and basically going on and working hard and basically trying not to leave anything to chance. But yeah, I mean, after the time of Bacup, I think it did develop me into a better player, even though the standard wasn't as technical as I'd been in the past. And like I say, it helped me develop the other side of the game that you kind of need to have. Again, as you've alluded on, not disrespecting non-league, it's still a good standard of football, and it's a big difference to when you're playing in the reserve setup at a professional club, because it's all about development at that kind of level, whereas in the non-league system, it's all about results, as it is in most first-team environments. It's a results business.
Exactly.
And
absolutely.
You have to do what's necessary to get the win. It can't always be the pretty football.
Absolutely.
And that follows through into all levels, really. You see that at the top level as well. Teams that will have a specific game plan, maybe to kind of set up against an opposition to not be broken down for 90 minutes and try and pick up on counter attack, that kind of thing. So you see that at every level, but it does make you understand the game of football more as the way that it's run.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think for me, definitely it's win at non-league. It's all out to win. I think first team football, irrespective of whether it's in professional football, in non-league football, it's a different cut above to playing certainly in the reserves and youth football, and it's all about winning, and the game's really physical. Did you find it hard to adjust to not the physical fitness side of things? The physical fitness side of things, I think that you'd be up in the top 10%, 15% at pro level. From the point of view of the physicality, the brutality of sort of playing away against a tough non-league team, that sort of really, really tough football. It really is good, honest, tough football. Challenges flying in and that sort of stuff. And teams do try to play football for sure, and Bacup's quite unique in that sense. They've got a great manager there who's always tried to play football. They've had, like you mentioned, likes of Andy Hill, who knows the game inside out, and they have had good players play there. That's for sure. But the bottom line is it's a different style of football. Irrespective of what you try and play in that league, there's going to be teams you come up against who are flying in and they're physical. And did you find that sort of physicality tough to adjust to? Or did you think, I'll roll my sleeves up and give as good as I get here?
Yeah, I mean, I personally, at the time, I kind of felt that I had to adapt my game to adjust to that. I've seen other lads, at that level, at that age, who've maybe struggled. It did take me a while to get used to it, but I did feel like I adapted quite well to that. Not only the physical opposition, but you're also talking about, in a professional setup. I've already mentioned at Sheffield United, the facilities were unbelievable. Obviously, at non-league level, you're then coming up against teams on certain pitches and surfaces, which, no discredit to anybody at non-league level, but they're not obviously as well maintained as some of the professional clubs' facilities are in regards to the surface that they're playing on, and it's just obviously due to sheer kind of financial aspects of the clubs that are in non-league and kind of the personnel and the manpower that they have behind the club. So that some of the surfaces that we were playing on at that time, again made me have to adapt my game of football, because even though you want to try and play on the deck and play the right way, there are times where it's actually a smarter option or a better option to maybe turn a team or to try and play down the channels and rather than overplaying in certain areas. So yeah, that was another adjustment for me that I had to kind of make.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's interesting you say. I mean, we've sort of seen players, young English players playing abroad in football, and we've seen certain players that have decided, if I'm not playing first team football here, I'll make a move and sort of see what I can do elsewhere. That's for sure, and it can work out well. You sort of made the move abroad. You went to Australia at that point there. How did you find you sort of grew on and off the field, like a move abroad? And you went to Spain as well, but we sort of touched on the experience in Australia. Do you find that, moving away and dissociating yourself from, we talked on this show a few weeks ago about the likes of Sancho went to Borussia Dortmund and he's sort of taken that opportunity and he's sort of thrust himself in the limelight of the England setup. Did you find that the experience of sort of playing abroad helped you, or?
Yeah, massively, and just why you touch on that point, I take my hat off to any young player who chooses to go down that path, because it can be quite a comfortable position if you're at a big club in the UK, to be training with them week in, week out, and kind of just sitting in your comfort zone and staying at home, or on the opposite side, as you've alluded to there with young Sancho, he's kind of gone abroad, taken his chance. Grabbed it by the scruff of the neck, and it's kind of reaping the rewards from the kind of the publicity and the plaudits he's getting for his performances on the field now. So, in my personal experience, when I went abroad again, it was a good learning curve for me and a great experience getting to spend 2 years playing out in Australia. The style of football, where again it differs from the non-league level in the UK. Maybe the heat has a little bit to do with that over there, but it wasn't as physical as some of the non-league level in the UK has been in the past and is at the moment. but it did help me in regards to the way I played, because I'd learned the physical side of the game during my time in non-league, and obviously I still retained and worked on the technical side. So that helped me massively when I went abroad. It helped me grow as a person. And
absolutely.
Off the field, I felt was definitely something that grown over those years.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, really. I think sometimes it's easy as a player. It's like you alluded to earlier. Some players decide, you know what, that's the end of that. And I always say to the young players that I speak to that if you don't make it over here, if your heart's on making it over here, and you don't make it, then maybe entertain the force of a scholarship in the USA and do a full-time education and play football pretty much full-time. Maybe go abroad, even to like the likes of Scandinavia or Asia, or it's a big world out there, other European countries, depending on where the opportunity presents itself, because obviously you're out there, who knows what can happen in that situation. I think that sometimes a change is as good as a rest, and I think that sometimes it's a question of, if it's not working for me in one place, another. But it is a big commitment, obviously, away from friends and family and all these things that we kind of take for granted sometimes. It's not easy in terms of I think people look at players, and we have it the other way around. Foreign players come to the UK and it takes a bit of time to adjust, because you're leaving your family behind and all the home comforts behind. All of a sudden you're in a new environment, you've got to prepare for a game, and I think sometimes, certainly in my experience, of working in different places, the players who come in from a different country, it's just giving them time to just settle, just the little things, even the little things they've got to adjust to, like just general things that they've got to do day by day. It's a big thing, but it's an opportunity for growth, that's for sure. And I believe when you you were at Sydney Olympic, you got the opportunity to play against the Australian national team. Is that correct? If I recall correctly, did you?
Yeah. So basically, at the time, the Socceroos were having a couple of local games in preparation for one of their World Cup qualifiers that they had coming up. It was a great experience to actually play against the national side. It's kind of unheard of over in the UK that you'd get the English national side playing up against a local or a professional or even semi-professional team in the UK. But the way that the systems and the setup is in Australia, they arrange that game to try and link that top level of football to the grassroots in Australia, to try and bring the local communities together in regards to putting that fixture on. And it was a great experience. And we also had some great friendlies against other great sides while I was over there. Definitely it was an experience that I look back on, and it was a good memory and a good thing to cherish, because I don't think that Australia get enough credit with some of the players that they have over there, and some of the players they've managed to produce over the years. So
definitely, I think so. Albeit, I believe in the Asian Cup they've just been knocked out to the UAE, but that also shows Asia in general. It's growing, and I think sometimes over in Europe it's easy to sort of turn a blind eye to Asia and think it's developing. The game in Asia is sort of rapidly and growing as well, and you got Japan and South Korea as well, and we saw South Korea pretty much knock out Germany in the World Cup. That was a pivotal game, and we've seen some performances by Japan, and certainly the game is growing in Asia. In India, we're seeing record attendances, in China as well, and it's growing along, and there's a big world out there. And I think sometimes if it's not working out one place, if you want to carry on the career that is, it's worth exploring other options, because you just never know. It's one of them. It's sort of just to keep the momentum going, and certainly I've known players that have gone out and played in the States, and they've sort of managed to sort of progress their career and go forward. And I think just weighing up different options to move forward can be a good thing. But it's not for everybody, and that's fair enough too. And then you went across to Spain. Was it with Cultura Deportiva for a little bit? Did you have a bit of a run with them, or was the
So at the end of the 2 years in Australia, obviously my visa had come to an end, and I'd made the decision that I wanted to come back to Europe and try and apply my trade in Europe. I signed with as you mentioned there, the name of the club, Deportivo Leonesa, in the north of Spain, in the Segunda division there. And again, it's a different style of football. So again, it was another string to my bow in a sense of I was learning another kind of way of playing, another style. And again, that was another barrier for me because I had to try and learn the local language and adjust to their way of life as such. And you know, for the first couple of months of training, when the coaches were explaining the drills, I kind of had to rely on eye contact and hand movement, or you know, one or two of the players could speak a little bit of English, so they'd try and help me and encourage me or kind of point me in the right direction on the field as well. So it was another good experience. I only stayed there for the majority of one season. I was kind of a bit player there. I wasn't a regular first team player. I was seeing a lot of my time sat in there or playing in the reserve team there. So in the January of that season, I decided to make the move back to the UK and see if I could secure a contract in one of the lower end professional football in the UK. You know, League One, League Two at the time. Unfortunately, the registration through from the Spanish FA wasn't completed in time, and I kind of missed the January window, so I ended up back in the UK, but unable to sign for anybody till the following season. Kept myself ticking over. I went and trained with Crawley Town for a little bit under Dean Saunders there, who also had me training when he was in charge at Chesterfield as well. I think I spent maybe up to 8 weeks training with them again, and I thank him for the time that he let me train there to try and maintain my fitness levels and that kind of tempo of football in a professional environment. So yeah, that was when I made my way back to the UK.
And did you?
Sorry.
Now, did you find that in Spain, the technical aspect of the game, did you actually find yourself that technically they were different to the UK? Were the players better technically in Spain, did you think, from the same level point of view? So if you're going to compare the league that you were in Spain to the same, was there any technical differences, do you think, or is that sort of, I wouldn't necessarily say a myth. I mean, we can see at international level that the Spanish players are certainly technically a little bit better, that's for sure. But at that sort of level, does it run sort of deep throughout the leagues? The Spanish are generally better technically, do you think, or is that something that's...
It's a difficult one to say. I mean, because I think the English game technically is also very, very high standard. But the way that they're maybe taught in Spain from a young age, even just to the way they receive a football, or their balance when they're dribbling with the ball, the technical aspect of it. There was, even at the Segunda level of Spanish football, there was a very good technical footballers. So I think in regards to the question there, that the technical ability is certainly there in Spain. Like you say, from the top level down to sort of the lower professional levels. And it was definitely something that helped me improve, because their philosophy a lot of the time was to play kind of out from the back, and have a good build-up play, keeping and retaining possession of the ball until there was an opening to penetrate. So you could be keeping the ball for a good 20, 30 passes, but it's kind of a more patient build-up approach opposed to some of the English clubs.
Yeah, that's interesting you say, and I think for me sometimes the sort of possession football in one sense, and I've sort of kept an eye, as you do, in different games, and I've sort of noticed that it's not necessarily stacking up in terms of teams that keep possession for long periods are winning games. And I think for me, this is certainly, my opinion, I think that a lot of coaches have got so hung up on possession that they're forgetting that, keeping the ball is one thing, but doing something with it is something altogether too. And I've seen many games, and statistically you think, if you didn't know the score to a lot of games, you'll think there's no way this team could have lost with all the possession they've had and shots and so on and so forth. But the realisation now that actually, you know what, we've got to sort of go back to basics again and play the ball in dangerous areas and get the balance. And it's all right having 75% possession, and it's all right having 20 shots on target and so on and so forth. But the problem is if the possession is in key areas and you're getting hit on the break, and certainly in Italy at the moment, Kingsley, in Italy, if you watch some of the Italian games, the big emphasis is to play from the back, and you're seeing certain teams really, really adamant they've got to play from the back, and you think that some teams are getting caught out where sometimes, you've got to play in dangerous areas. And for me, watching the likes of Napoli play this year under Ancelotti, we're seeing a different game where it's more improvised, where, okay, there's a time and place for everything. There's a time and place to play it out from the back. There's a time and place to go route one. There's a time and place to pick your best option and think forward. And do you think yourself, in your experience, do you find that sometimes there's so much emphasis on possession but not, okay, what we do with the ball, the end product, or is that just something passively it's just my illusion passively?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the coach who's in charge of the club and obviously the way they want to play. But it has been said from time to time from different pundits and obviously managers, you hear the term overplaying. Where, like you say, teams are looking to pass and keep possession of the ball, but with no real purpose or intent to penetrate or kind of getting behind a football team. So, I think it's obviously everybody's got their own interpretation of kind of the passing way of football. But I think if you are going to play a passing build-up or a possession-based game, there has to be some sort of element of that where there's a certain game plan of when to kind of attack or when or how they're going to try and attack them and which areas they're going to try and play those forward passes.
Yes, indeed.
I think it's an interpretation from different managers and different styles.
Yeah, they impose their style for sure. Yeah, and I think certainly youth development, it's possession, keep the ball, and so on and so forth. We know that you can't score without the ball, and if you break it down, on average, the team has the ball on field in play for about each player. I think it's roughly, if memory serves me correct, about 3 minutes on the ball on average. Each player touches the ball, so movement off the ball is imperative, and keeping the ball as much as you can is imperative. If the other team's not got the ball, then they can't score, generally speaking. But obviously, there's the other side of things where we see opportunities to get the ball forward and it doesn't happen, or big mistakes at the back as well. Sometimes you think, well, what's going on here? Just get the ball out of that danger area. But one of the things for me, I think this is sort of, my opinion, I think that it's difficult, obviously, for footballers who are coming through to comment, but certainly from my point of view, I think for me, certain young players, certainly in this country, not just in this country, but even in Europe too, they don't get the opportunity to play first team football as much as I think I know it's difficult. I know it's easy for me to say I'm not in the hot seat in that situation. I've been there before where we wanted to promote youth, and it's not easy when you're trying to get results. But I think for me, sometimes what does happen is players are brought in. It's almost like the flavour of the month type thing. Well, this country's won the World Cup, and then there's like a massive recruitment policy to find players from there, and so on and so forth. When there's so many talented players, Kingsley, in this country, it's unbelievable. You could just in and around Manchester, and yourself, his testimony. You went to the second chance academy provision. Andy Hill obviously saw something in you. He knows a player. He's been in the professional game. It's just a shame we don't have as much as that going on at the moment, because for me there are players that certainly could go above and beyond, and there are some great players, and they enhance the game from abroad. Some great players come into the game here, fantastic players who really, really embrace the game, and it's great for young players like yourself coming through the system to see these top players and be around them. But then there's also the players that block a channel for players coming through. Do you think there's pressure on players, on managers to get results quick, and that stops them from giving young players a chance?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, to be honest with you, the young English players sometimes get overlooked in regards to them being given an opportunity. Because, like you say, the over the last kind of decade or so, the foreign influence in the English leagues has been massive, and obviously there's been some great players over the years that have come over to the UK and obviously have been some of the star attractions in the Premier League and some of the other leagues. So I think the natural thought is to go and find the next, big thing, but from abroad, i.e. the next, Thierry Henry, or the next, Ruud van Nistelrooy, or whoever's obviously been over to the UK from foreign kind of shores and obviously lit up those football leagues. So I think the mindset is that the next best thing is going to come from another country without actually looking at what's in the backyard. So there are some, like you say, some great players across the leagues in the UK and through the youth setups. And I think the mindset is slightly changing now over here in regards to you are seeing some of the younger players being given a bit more of a chance. Even if it's a case of being loaned out to, you know, a Championship first team or a League One first team, and then being given the opportunity to shine. And whether that be them getting a recall back to their kind of parent club or the club that they've been out on loan at, taking them on a permanent deal, it still gives them that pathway to go and play first team professional football.
Yeah, and there's almost like an irony there too, in a way, Kingsley, because some of the managers who are doing that are managers from abroad, and the likes of Pochettino, who's stood by his young players at Tottenham, and I think some of the players at Tottenham are the backbone of the England team, and he stuck by him. He was the same at Southampton, and in United, Van Gaal at time, he gave the young players a go, and certainly for me, there's almost like an irony where, some of the managers from abroad are really encouraging it, and I know in certain situations it's not easy when you're managing a team that hasn't got the resources that a top tier team has, like a Big Four or something like that. But equally in saying that, for me, what has proven to be instrumental is, I think for me, building a team with a spine of players that know the league is key. It really is. I think that any successful story is going to be a team that has got, a group of players that know the club inside out, that love the club, that want to be there, because it's infectious, see. That's the big thing. And I think Guardiola, from what I can see, looking from the outside in, he's sort of tried to do that, to sort of try and keep that sort of team sort of spirit. A bit like, say, United with the sort of class of 92. They had that sort of backbone of players that knew what it meant to play for United. And in one sense, to be fair, with Solskjaer there now, it looks like they're sort of going to create that a little bit. They've got, a good young crop of players coming through, and it's giving them the chance. That's the key thing. Yeah. And do you think it's important to have a blend of players? Because if you sort of bring in players from different parts of the globe, and there's nothing wrong in doing that, and teams do well doing that, but I think the sort of key thing is to sort of have at least a spine of a team that understand what it means to wear the shirt in the derby, to wear the shirt and to play for the shirt and for the club as much as anything else. And that's not saying players that come in from abroad don't do that, but if you sort of turn up to a club and you see, a big player there who's been there, who represents the club, it must be a big thing, do you not think?
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, the spine of a team, if you can get characters and personnel in there, like you say, who know what it means to play for that particular club, or know the history or what it actually means to the fans and supporters and the people behind that football club, then it's only going to be a positive thing in the dressing room. In regards to some of the managers who maybe don't favour younger players, I can sympathise with them in a certain kind of light, but at the same time, I do believe that they should give certain players a go. There's the old saying that if you're good enough, then it doesn't really matter how old you are. If you're good enough, then you're old enough. But obviously, as we've mentioned, football is a results business, and at professional level, you've got obviously managers who not just looking out for the results of the team, but potentially looking at their own position as well, thinking, well, am I going to take a gamble and put a young lad in when I need a result? Because, like you say, it's a results business, and if any manager's looking at back-to-back defeats or a few defeats on the bounce, his own job's under pressure, and the fans are quick to kind of potentially turn on management when that kind of thing happens. And like I say, I do kind of see it from their eyes as well. But exactly. At the same time, it's kind of it can be a vicious cycle where like you say, managers will just do what they need to do to try and get a result. And you've seen over the years certain managers who specialise in that. You look at the likes of Sam Allardyce. If a football club appoints him as a manager, you know what kind of style of football you're going to get. Exactly. But you also know that you are going to get majority of the time. He's proven that he can keep teams up and avoid them from relegation. And again, it comes down to he's very much a results-based manager. You know, he doesn't always play the pretty football, but you have to kind of give him credit, and you kind of have to admire the way that he operates sometimes in regards to how he can get a job done. So in that kind of example, you know, managers like that will probably always opt for experience and older heads in the changing room, because he knows that they're proven that under pressure that they can perform, opposed to potentially a youngster who's got all the ability in the world but hasn't been proven at that kind of top level or professional level. So
that's interesting to say. That's an interesting point. For me, I have to admit, I mean, last year I went to watch Wolves play against Bolton, and I looked at the team and I was pleasantly surprised. The style of football that Nuno Espirito Santo was playing was incredible football. He had these young players buzzing about and playing great football, and they sort of carried it on. I felt, me personally, of all the teams coming up from the Championship, that would be the team that would probably impose themselves most. That said, they've got a tough game coming up in a couple of weeks against Shrewsbury in the FA Cup, and that was probably one of them sort of games that sort of surprised me in one sense. But the point being is that it's a tough one. I can perfectly understand, you know, managers to go in there and pull all the stops to keep a team up. But in saying that, it's been proven too that if you back some of the young players and certainly, you know, give them the chance, then you're on the way. But there's certainly a lot of players, that's for sure, in and around the area that I think that could do a fantastic job. And in terms of yourself now, you find you're at Radcliffe now, and that's a very good standard, by the way. Radcliffe is a great club too, and I remember years ago when I was working at Barry, we played against them in friendlies at the start of the season. It's a really, really nice club, to really, really nice setup there. And how have you found your time at Radcliffe so far, Kingsley? How have you found that going so far?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's my local club. Obviously, I only live around the corner from their ground.
Yeah.
So for me, when I got the opportunity to go and play there, it was obviously an easy decision for me to make. You know, we've got kind of great management and people who run the club. Obviously, with the management staff now being our manager John Macken, and obviously ex-Man City. You know, he's a bit of a legend over at Preston North End as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
We've got our assistant, Frank Sinclair, again, FA Cup winner with Chelsea. Obviously, again, finished his career at other clubs, even at Leicester, that kind of thing. So we've got great staff and great kind of great people in the club who've been there and done it at a professional level, and they can impose that and kind of put that into Radcliffe to a certain extent and try and run the club as professionally as possible. So, yeah, it's great for me to be there. And, you know, I captain the club at the moment, and everything's kind of going well, and we're challenging for promotion this season. So, you know, it's very good. That's all I can say around that.
Yeah.
You know, we've got a great team spirit.
Fantastic.
And like you've mentioned, you know, having certain personnel in the dressing room and a certain attitude and understanding what it means to the club can be a massive thing. And I think that we've got a good mix and a good balance around that at the minute. So. Yeah,
no, that's great stuff, and I think that's, you know, certainly a perfect fit for this stage of your career. In that sense, it's always good to play for the club that represents your local club in one sense, and they're a great club, and obviously they're capable of doing good things. It's not easy in the non-league. We've sort of touched on the non-league on our show recently, and a few weeks ago we had Chris Casper from Salford come on the show, and he talked about the experience there. Now, we're well aware, obviously, that they've had finances put into the club, and it's not easy financially to run a club, but it is what it is. And I think for me, it's like finances can take you so far, but you still got to go out there and do the job. And that's the big thing, really, that is important too. I mean, you know, you can, irrespective of investment, you still got to do the job. Obviously, investment helps a lot in many ways, and you can get certain players in and wages, but equally in saying that, you know, it's not easy, I think that brings a different type of pressure to the club. But equally, like you mentioned before, the players, also management as well, probably don't get the chance to manage at a higher level. Sometimes even in management's what's fashionable. Certain country wins the World Cup, and then all of a sudden you've got managers being flooded or coaches from that And I think for me, there's some great coaches too in the UK. There really is, and having had the experience of sort of going down and to conferences and events and having friends in the game and seeing what goes on, there's some very, very talented coaches in the UK and managers that, given the chance, would do a wonderful thing. And I think Southgate's testimony of that. I mean, he got the chance with England. I think it was a great decision. It was a brave decision, albeit he'd be the first to say it's not job done. But I think for me, it sort of showed that, okay, you can, bring someone in who is and knows the game and has the sort of passion too to sort of go that bit of an extra mile too. They understand the players. And I think for me, what's interesting really is how important do you think it is that managers can connect with players, but also young players? It seems to me that Southgate, he has a really strong connection with young players. He's able to sort of get the best out of them. He manages them really, really well. We saw that at the World Cup. He sort of deflected the pressure off them. Do you think it's important that coaches and managers can do that, can sort of take the pressure off the younger players and just let them play?
Yeah, I think that's a great point you've made there. I think it's a crucial point as well. As you said there, the relationship between kind of management and players kind of has to work in order for the managers to get the best out of their players. And you've seen obviously that at the international level here in the UK. The players have responded very well to Southgate and obviously his way of wanting to play football. You can see from kind of past England teams who arguably had some of the best footballers that this country have ever produced. When it got to international level, you've seen them kind of play more of a rigid style of football. When you've watched the World Cup this year, you can see a bit more of a fluidity to the way that England set up and the way that they played. And I think a lot of that would have been down to, like I say, the relationship between the management and the players, the understanding of what they were looking to achieve, and again, the collectiveness of the team, and obviously understanding what it means to put that England shirt on. So I think you raise a good point there, and even at club levels, like you mentioned at Manchester United at the moment, I think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has kind of come in and maybe reiterated how important to some of those players that they're wearing that shirt is, and what that badge represents, and the history behind it. And obviously you can't take anything away from Mourinho, because he's been proven and successful in every country that he's managed in. But I think not just him, but with other managers over the years, you can kind of see when players aren't really playing for the badge or for the manager, you can see how that really affects the performances on the field. For sure. Yeah, I think it's a big point to make there.
Yeah, I think, and I think for me, looking at things, how things have been progressing in England, and I think the way things are progressing and the developments over the years, and I think in the next 10, 15 years that there's definitely going to be the opportunity to win something. That's for sure, and the young players coming through. And I say that based on my experience of sort of attending certain conferences, courses and seminars and speaking to people in the game, and some great things happening. And certainly at youth level, they've won a lot of things and they've imposed themselves. My only concern is that can these youth players not just make the transition, but give the chance to make the transition. I truly believe that within the next 10, 15 years, the youth players are given the chance, the ones that have sort of won tournaments at youth level, then England will. There's no reason why they shouldn't win a major trophy. What I would say the other side of it too is that I think that the World Cup in one sense was, I wouldn't say a false dichotomy in the sense that they did really well. No one's taking anything away from England's performances, but I think the long and short of it is they did lose to Belgium. They did get beat to Belgium twice. They did lose to Croatia as well. And I think that, that's 3 games lost. And the teams they did beat, no disrespect to the teams they did beat, they were good teams, obviously, but they beat Colombia on penalties. The group games, you expect they'd win those games. Sweden, you think, well, on the balance thing. So I think for me, I wouldn't say undermine what they achieved. It was great for the country, brought the country together. It was a fantastic summit, really was. But from a football purist point of view, I think, and Southgate, no doubt, will have feet on the ground. I still think for me, it needs players to be given the chance. I always say, and I raised this question one time at a course, I said, if a Messi was coming through the system in the UK, would he be given the chance, so to speak? Would coaches see that? And I don't know. I'm not entirely confident. Not that they can't pick a player, just to sort of pace of the game, the criteria sometimes they look for, and that's a danger, because I think for me to go the extra mile and win a tournament, you do need a game breaker, game changer. I think it really helps if you've got like a Ronaldo, a Messi. If you've got a player that can just, even a Modric, someone who's thinks 20 steps ahead of everybody else in the game, and you don't see that many players in the game here. You don't really tend to see the Modric's, the Messis, the Ronaldos, and these players are hard to come by the chance. But do you not think yourself there's something in that potentially we overlook certain players here because we tend to favour players that are a certain stature, physicality? Is that something that sort of maybe that's...
Yeah, I think potentially, yeah. I mean, the whole thing you mentioned there around the stature and physicality, I think has been a tradition in English football, to have big, strong, physical lads over the years. But obviously you've seen some of the other nations, you're looking at kind of the Spanish team that went on to win the World Cup and the Euro back-to-back, the physicality side of their team wasn't, anything compared to some of the other nations out there. You look at some of the other world-class greats, people like Fabio Cannavaro, who's obviously captained the Italian team. I think he was maybe 5'7" or something like that, 5'8", and for him to be classed as a legend, a centre-back legend, it kind of shows that there are the anomalies in the game, like of Messi that can go on and basically be head and shoulders above other people, regardless of physical stature, but more around the technical ability and obviously the speed of thought as well. Precisely,
and I think that was evident in the semi-final, England, that Modric was like had him. You had. I mean, with the greatest respect, if he sort of turns up to a championship club and he's unknown, they're going to look and think, well, you know what, physically, there's every chance they might overlook the player just on the basis that he isn't a certain height and muscular weight. But the guy ran the show. He was, for me, in my opinion, certainly just. I think on that one, Jimmy. I think a lot of clubs and management, and even to the extent of scouts, when they're given a scout profile for the kind of player they're looking for, they'll obviously kind of mention in their height and physicality, and maybe they'll go out and look for certain players that tick the boxes kind of thing. But like you say, I think there is a presumption made with... Okay, we seem to have have lost Kingsley on the line, but we were talking about players there, and it was quite fascinating to talk to Kingsley about players and his opinion of players and of different statures. So we sort of were touching on players and getting his opinion on his thoughts anyway on players of certain stature to get overlooked. And certainly in my experience, having watched the World Cup and we cast our mind back to that semi-final, Modric ran the show. That's not saying undermining the players over here, some great players, but maybe we've got to look at the criteria of players that we do bring on board. I don't know. One thing's for sure is certainly that we are producing. One thing's for sure that good players are coming through. We are seeing some top players coming through, and if they're given the chance, who knows what's possible going forward. That's for sure. But we can't take anything away from the work's being done. That's for sure, and it's work in progress. And you can only beat what's in front of you. That's for sure. But it was a fascinating insight. Do email us. I do encourage you to drop us an email, send us a text, or get in touch on the Facebook page, the Friday Weekly Sports Show, and give us your thoughts. If you just reflect on some of the things that Kingsley Williams spoke about this evening, some really, really fascinating insights he gave us. He was kind enough to give us some really fascinating insights into the game, his experiences. He'd played abroad. He'd played in that successful Sheffield United team. He'd played in different countries. He's back playing for Radcliffe now. And I believe he set his own business up too now as well. So he's got, things on taking all his experiences and sort of, I'm sure he's enjoying life playing football at a very good level and running his business and everything that goes with that. But, there's certain players out there that do get released that think that's it. It's over type thing. And I think all of us can just be the best we can be. And I do believe that there is a luck element in the game too. And I know a lot of people are probably going to email or get in touch on social media and say, well, luck doesn't play a great part. But it does, to the point. And what I mean by that is that it's not taking away from preparation. It's not saying that, you don't train hard, you'll get there. What I say about luck is sometimes the right opportunity opening itself up. I think for me, a player like Kingsley, for example, if the right opportunity comes up, he's definitely not going to be out of place at the very highest level. Certainly at the stage of his career, or any stage of his career, but, coming through the ranks, that there's probably not a great deal of difference between him and some of the players from that successful Sheffield United team that went on to do really, really well. So you've got to sort of take that in consideration, what could have been. But you keep going, and that's the sort of key to all of it. A bit closer to home, we've got the Manchester clubs in action, Newcastle versus City. We talked about that before. Man United versus Burnley, Liverpool versus Leicester. Some really interesting games coming up. And it's a pivotal week in the league because they're teams that, City should win that. United should win that. And Liverpool should win that. But we know football and anything's possible in the game of football, and all things being that they are. It's fantastic Premier League at the moment. We've got all this sort of jostling for position at the top, for the top four as well, a resurgent Man United. And even closer to home, we've got Salford in action this week. And that's going to be a tough game for them, Gateshead. It's not easy. I think last week, one thing's for sure, the opportunity that Salford had to go top of the league. Okay, they drew. Gateshead, they drew against Gateshead at home. They probably would have expected to win that, but football at that level, or any level, we know on any given day, anyone can beat anybody. But they'd probably take a draw and they just sit behind Leyton Orient and Solihull, who's sort of crept up out of nowhere, and they're out there. But Halifax away won't be easy. The Shea is not an easy place to go, and if they can get a win there and results go accordingly, then they can find themselves top of the game, top of the league. But in saying that, as long as they can sort of sit in that top three, near the business end of the league, then they've got a very good chance to go up, which no doubt all the management and staff there and players will have their heart set on doing so. But from a fan point of view, how amazing is it to go and watch Salford play week in, week out, and the dream is still alive. The opportunity to play in league football at some point is still there. So it's been a fantastic show. We were very, very happy to have Kingsley on the show. He gave us a great insight into the show. Hopefully you enjoyed